Look, you got to be thorough if you want to build out a solid NFL Dynasty roster for fantasy. And that means looking at every single team, at all the players. I don't want to look at the Jacksonville Jaguars any more than you do, but we're here and we got to look at it. Let's do it. All right, so the Jaguars had pretty much a disaster of a season, but they do have some relevant players for Dynasty next year. So we'll start off with Trevor Lawrence. He finished as QB 22. We also have Travis Etienne, who didn't play this year. We have James Robinson, who tore his Achilles in Week 17, but also finished the season as RB 25. Marvin Jones Jr., who is wide receiver 37 on the year. And a toss-up between Jamal Agnew and Laviska Shenault. I'm going to go with Jamal Agnew for this one. I do think Trevor Lawrence is going to be worth your time and scouting out and possibly acquiring if you can get him for a low price, whether he be on your waiver wire or you can trade a low pick for him. But I think he's going to benefit from having a complete run game next year, whether it be, just Travis Etienne, who's got chemistry with playing at Clemson, or whether it be James Robinson comes back early and you have a complement, a 1-2 punch of Travis Etienne and James Robinson. Whatever it is, I think next year they're going to have more stability. He can get comfortable in the offense knowing that he's going to have that coach for at least a couple of years. He's going to have that system for at least a couple of years. And he'll get more time to actually, not worry about the chaos of having to deal with the media, because dealing with Urban Meyer this year, it was rough. I will admit you have to kind of take a flyer on Etienne because we haven't seen him play yet. I think he's a really talented back if you look at what he did at Clemson. But, you never know how that translates to the NFL, especially, not having your rookie season and not being able to get better while others are getting better. Instead, you're just rehabbing. That's going to be rough for him. But I think his dynasty value is bolstered because James Robinson's actually going to be a restricted free agent in 2 years. So they're going to want to see what they have in Etienne. And he might just have the show completely to himself and have a workhorse role going forward in 2 years. So you can actually get in early on that. Next, let's take a look at James Robinson. This one's tough to gauge. He had just under 1,000 yards rushing, 8 touchdowns, 222 yards receiving with no touchdowns. He tore his Achilles in Week 17, so I'm not even sure that he'll be back next year, but the way people are returning from injuries now, he might be, if Cam Akers is any indication. So we're probably not going to get, normal James Robinson in the year 2022. And then in 2023, we'll probably get James Robinson that we're used to seeing. And in that year, he's going to be a restricted free agent, so we don't know if he'll be with Jacksonville or not. He's tough to gauge. I think if you have Travis Etienne, you might want to have James Robinson as a handcuff and vice versa. But you probably don't want to trade James Robinson right now because I don't know where exactly his dynasty value would be because he's got so much inherent risk. Let's take a look at some of the weapons here on the receiving end. We've got Marvin Jones Jr., just under 1,000 yards receiving, 4 touchdowns. I'm not very high on Marvin Jones. We see what Matt Stafford's doing with the Rams now, and I think he was a product of that in Detroit. I think he's a functional wide receiver 1 right now because he's the best wide receiver they have on the roster, but I don't think that's his future role when we get towards the draft and maybe they make some off-season moves to try to bolster that receiving core for Trevor Lawrence. I think he's got potential to be a cheap value in drafts next year, but I wouldn't spend too much on him. Lastly, let's get to Jamal Agnew. So this one was tough because it's kind of a toss-up between whether you think Laviska Shenault is the next best receiver on this team, but I'm a Jamal Agnew guy. And the reason I'm high on Jamal Agnew is because he kind of eclipsed Shenault as their primary gadget/weapon. A guy like Deebo Samuel who's getting touches on the ground and also getting targets in the air. Somebody who's just so fast, you have to give them the ball in space if you can. A Tyreek Hill type of player. So the reason you might want to stick with Chenault is because Agnew was kind of Urban Meyer's guy, and Urban Meyer's gone now. So I don't know if he's going to get that same treatment from the next coach, if he just, earned it from being that guy, or if, maybe something will come down from above and they'll say, we want to see what we have in Laviska Shenault because we drafted him at a certain level and we want to know if that's worth the investment. So there's a chance that all the good work Jamal Agnew put in this year before he got hurt, it might go away considering they're going to have a new coach and a new system. So that's something to look out for, but you're not going to have to spend a lot to get Jamal Agnew. All right, let's take a look at their goals for next year. So first and foremost, they've got to get a head coach. They need to know what their offensive scheme is going to be. They need to know what their defensive scheme is going to be, because it doesn't matter who you draft if they don't fit your system. Next, they've got that first overall pick, and they've got a lot of holes. They could go O-line, wide receiver, or pass rusher with that number 1 overall. But personally, I think the best move would be to trade out of that number 1 pick and get as many assets as you can. Because a team like this who's not close, they're not, 1 player away, they're not even, 2 or 3 players away from being a playoff team. They have so many holes that they need to retool and regroup. And the best way to go about that is to just spread out your luck, spread out your risk, and try to get as many players as you can. So that's what I would do. Time will tell what they do with that first overall pick, but I think it's clear that they've got a lot of work to do.